Okay, that brings us to the Battle of Ortona. This is definitely the most significant battle for the Canadians in Italy. It involves the Canadian 1st Division, one brigade of the 1st Division. A brigade has 3 battalions. A battalion has about, well, let's say 1,000 men. So we're talking about 3,000 Canadian infantry attacking this small town. The town itself was on the Adriatic Sea. It was a non-strategic town, which means that the town itself was not important. What made it important is that it was one end of the winter line. In Ortona, the Canadians participated in the most deadly close-quarter fighting of the war for them. And they invented a technique called mouse holing. And basically what this means is, instead of traveling in the streets where you can easily be shot, they would move from house to house by blowing holes in walls using explosives so that they wouldn't have to move on the street to move from one house to the other house. They would just go right through the walls. Because of the ferocity of the fighting, Ortona was given 2 nicknames. One of those nicknames was Bloody December, and the other nickname was Little Stalingrad. And that's because the Battle of Stalingrad in Russia was a very, very bloody urban battle. And so to compare Ortona to Stalingrad is important. You can see in the last bullet there that almost 1,400 Canadian soldiers were killed in the 1 week around Christmas time in 1943. And that's significant because it means that the campaign around Ortona was equal to about 25% of all Canadian soldiers killed in the whole Italian campaign. Now, who from the 1st Division actually went into Ortona? It was the 2nd Infantry Brigade, and this brigade was made up of regiments from Western Canada. Okay, on the left here we have the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. You might remember them from our study of the First World War. They were the soldiers that fought in the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, which was the first time the Germans used gas. Okay, we also have the 49th Loyal Edmonton Regiment, obviously from Edmonton, and the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada, based here in Vancouver. When it came to moving into the town of Ortona, the Loyal Edmonton Regiment and the Seaforths were in the front, and the Patricias were in reserve. Now, if we look at the area around Ortona, you can see where the 2nd Brigade was moving from the south towards the coast. The Seaforths were actually moving along the coastline. The Edmontons were a little further inland, and then you can see with a dotted circle the PPCLI in reserve. If we take a look at the town itself, you can see that it is a seaside village. There's a breakwater, a series of breakwaters creating a harbor. And you can see that when the battalions moved into the city, the Seaforths moved from their position on the right, crossing over the Loyal Edmonton Regiment as they fought their way through the town. And so we have this sort of crisscross motion between the 2 attacking battalions. And then in the end, the PPCLI moving up through those and then taking the lead after the battle. Here's a view of Ortona from the coast, and this is what it looked like in December of 1943 as the Seaforths approached. Now, I told you about mouse holing and the fact that the soldiers wanted to try to stay out of the alleys and the streets. And the reason is that it becomes very easy for the enemy to hide themselves. Any window, any door, any ledge is a possible location for one of the German soldiers to be lying in wait. And so if you're walking down the middle of the street, you are creating for yourself a very dangerous situation. In the military, fighting in built-up areas or urban areas is definitely the most dangerous type of fighting for an attacker. It gives the defenders a huge advantage. There are all sorts of things that they can do tactically to make it difficult for the attackers to get in. And so if we think back to the Middle Ages, the notion of castles, the advantage goes to the defender initially. An illustration showing how dangerous it could be in a street. Now this illustration is important. If you look on the map, here it says MG, that stands for machine gun. And you can see that the Germans would locate themselves strategically around these intersections. And what gets built is called a situation that has interlocking arcs of fire. And I'm going to give you another slide in a moment to show what that means. Over here we have S mines or shrapnel mines. The Allies called these bouncing Bettys because the mine, when it was tripped, would actually jump up about 3 feet in the air to create a situation where the shrapnel or the little pieces of metal inside the mine would more easily be able to kill its victims. A teller mine is an anti-tank mine. That means that if a soldier stands on this, it's not going to explode. It needs the weight of something like a vehicle in order to detonate it. But what the Germans would often do is they would take these teller mines and they would wire them together, and then they would use a booby trap switch to command detonate it. That means that they're not waiting for somebody to step on the mine, they're waiting for somebody to go near the mine or the series of mines, and then they detonate it. This is the sort of thing that's happening in Afghanistan right now. This is what we would today call an IED, an improvised explosive device. So this area of crossfire or interlocking arcs of fire is called the killing zone. Now, to give you a bit better idea of how important this is and why it makes attacking a town so difficult, we can see that these soldiers are shooting on their individual arcs of fire. One soldier, however, doesn't just fire in a straight line. He can turn his weapon to the left and the right, and because the other soldiers can do that too, we have an area created in the center where all 5 soldiers are shooting. So very deadly for a soldier that's attacking to pass inside that yellow zone. And then, of course, if we go to the lighter gray zone around it, that zone is not covered by 1, but at least 2 soldiers. So this is very good for the defender and very difficult for the attacker. Now, what do the Canadian soldiers have as far as equipment is concerned? So let's look at this picture and describe some of the gear that they would carry. Okay, so at the top we have a steel helmet. This gives almost no protection. Certainly a bullet would go right through this helmet. It's the easiest way to describe it, it's like a hard hat that a carpenter would wear at a construction site. It's not designed to stop a bullet, it's designed to stop rocks and little bits of flying debris. So not much protection and uncomfortable to wear. Okay, the soldiers have what's called webbing, and this involves a belt with shoulder straps and pouches made out of heavy canvas. On the front of the webbing are 2 ammo pouches, and this is where the soldier would carry his bullets. Each infantryman would carry 120 bullets. At the back is a gas cape, what we might think today of being kind of like a tarpaulin or a poncho. This gas cape would be impregnated with chemicals to help neutralize gas if the Germans had used it. You can see the water bottle. A Mills bomb is the name for the British and Canadian grenades, and I'll show you a picture of one in a moment. We have the bayonet in a metal scabbard on the belt. Okay, there's also an entrenching tool. This is a flat-bladed shovel. Very difficult to dig a trench with anything other than a real pick and a real shovel. So normally if they were digging a trench, they wouldn't use the entrenching tool. This is sort of an emergency tool that you would use if you found yourself sort of isolated in a field or something and wanted to give yourself some protection. Okay, the wool battle dress, very thick. At the beginning of the campaign, they were wearing shorts and just cotton shirts because it was so hot, but as they approach wintertime, they're reissued with their wool battle dress. The wool battle dress, again, was impregnated in chemicals to try to neutralize gas if the Germans had used gas. This means that it didn't breathe very well, and so when you're running around fighting, you would sweat heavily, and it was very uncomfortable to wear and itchy. Okay, they have web gaiters. Their pants are tucked into these straps. Remember, in the First World War, if we look at a soldier of the First World War, they would have those wool puttees wrapped all the way up to their knees. Okay, so in the Second World War, they've gotten rid of the puttees, and now they're just wearing these canvas straps around the bottoms of their pants. And then, of course, they have boots, but the boots have steel hobnails in the bottom so that the leather of the boots doesn't wear out. Very difficult to run in. These are heavy boots. Now, the amount of gear that a soldier carries is usually about 90 pounds, and so it's the job of the commanders to decide how do they want those 90 pounds to be distributed. A water bottle is heavy. If you've ever carried your water bottle to a soccer game, you know how much that weighs, and the bullets are very heavy. So if we look at this picture, I ask you, what evidence do you see? Well, we can see that these soldiers, in fact, are fighting in an alley. You can see that there's a dead soldier here. It would be for us to try to determine, is this a German soldier or is this a Canadian soldier? If you look at the backs of the soldiers, you can see one of them has a gas cape and one does not. You can see the entrenching tools. You can see the water bottles. You can see the Lee-Enfield rifles. It's interesting, this soldier up here has his bayonet fixed onto his rifle.